Hamza, are you ready?
जी भाई
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's go, man.
Sure.
Looking forward to it.
Ravi Sab, you've disabled screen sharing.
I think it's Abir.
Abir bhai.
Abir bhai.
How are you guys?
अच्छा ये कौन है proper cute. Oh, mashallah.
My nephew.
Proper cute.
Bring him often.
Uh,
Assalamualaikum, Anas. Didn't see you there, yaar. Good to see you again, man.
Apologies for being late.
No problem. No problem.
Abir bhai, can you enable screen sharing, please?
Yes, of course. I do apologize.
I don't know. I think I did it.
I'm not sure.
Oh, ho gaya. Jazak.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Acha. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So guys, the book we're looking at today is A Hidden Truth, discussed with Murabi Saab offline. As the books are getting a bit longer now, this one's about 60 pages, so it's more difficult to summarize it in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to do this one half and half this week, inshallah, and half next week. So it's published in 1898 by the Promised Messiah, alayhi salam, and it revolves around a common theme of many of his books, which is Jesus, alayhi salam, and it's has a lot of evidence based from literature and from books about the accurate biographical findings of the life of Jesus alayhi salam, how he survived the crucifixion and his travels beyond that around India, Tibet, and Nepal and all these regions. And it also has a prophecy of a well-known enemy and of Ahmadiyyat and the Prophet alayhi salam, Muhammad Hussain Batalwi Saab. So he starts the book by mentioning the Mubahala, or the prayer duel, that was scheduled to take place on the 21st of November 1898 with the Maulvi Muhammad Hussain Batalwa Saab. And the period of this prayer duel would expire on the 15th of January 1900. And he gets onto it in more detail a little bit later in the book. But in the meantime, he urges his Jamaat, so all of us Ahmadis as well, this is an instruction for us, that we should establish that quality of Rahman in our own selves. So meaning gracious, meaning those who are believers in a gracious God, those who abuse us, those who swear at us or give us abuse of any kind, we respond to them with kindness and we just say peace and Ameen. That's the teaching essentially from the Prophet ﷺ of anyone in his age and in our age as well who gives us abuse. And he said that the success of all the prophets of the past, they all show gentleness, humility, patience and righteousness. And again, he relates it to Jesus Islam and how through his work they will confirm that he did not die in a cursed death. Again, recurring themes in all of his books. And then he talks about the migration of Jesus Islam from Palestine to India and in that subcontinent area. So he migrated in the third year of his ministry, and the thing that he always mentions about Jesus Islam is that he wanted to convey his message to the lost tribes of Israel. And this thing that I mentioned here is the Diaspora of Babylon, which essentially Babylon was the capital of Babylonia in ancient Mesopotamia, and in that time, Jews of that time who were getting a lot of persecution from the well-known figure. I can't remember his name. His name's quite hard to pronounce, but I'll get onto it later slide. From him, they had to migrate from Babylon to different areas of the world, and this was to India, Kashmir, and Tibet, and other regions as well. And then later on, I get to the evidence of how he passed away in Srinagar, in Kashmir. And again, he always reiterates that the righteous will always prosper over the enemies, and he gives the example of the Holy Prophet ﷺ and Abu Jahl. And again, reiterating that prophets always prosper not due to force or not due to physical power or strength, but due to their character. And then he talks briefly about miracles as well. I'll just read this bit briefly. God can never be pleased with you if one more dear than him dwells in your hearts. If you wish to behold God in this very world, devote yourself in his way, immerse yourself in him, and become wholly his. So again, a little bit about what Murabi Saab is telling us about, to always give precedence to faith over worldly matters. And yeah, we will have our jobs and things, but always think about how you can sacrifice for the Jamaat first. And then he talks about those who try to reform themselves, even the most sinful people. when Allah sees us making effort, He becomes aware of it in heaven. And then when we achieve the highest, the most special grace, which is Malikiyat, we can then become recipients of true dreams and revelations. Not to obviously to the same degree as a prophet, but of a truly righteous person. And then again, he talks about miracles, and those are vouchsafed for his prophets who show great patience in the face of extreme opposition and hostility. And when Allah hears their sincere supplications, that's when He shows so many signs and their supports, like the acceptance of prayers, like the earthquakes, like the plague, all these sorts of things. And then he talks about the prophecy relating to Muhammad Hussein and two other Maulwis of the time, that by the 15th of January 1900, God would disgrace and humiliate the liar. And despite this warning, these Maulwis, they continued to use abusive language and said very rude and vulgar things with regards to the Prophet Islam and Ahmadiyyat, etc. And Prophet Islam simply responded by saying, "May Allah curse those who are lie. May Allah's curse be upon those who are lie." And he relates to them, obviously at this time, the prophecies regarding Abdullah Atham and Lekhram, they'd all come true at this point. So he encourages them to stop using inappropriate language, otherwise their fate will be the same or similar. And then he goes on to probably the crux of the book, which is about Prince Yus Asaf, or Jesus alayhi salam. And there's one of his devoted followers in Kashmir at the time, which was Abdullah. His name was Abdullah. I'm not sure what his full name was, and he was a resident of Kashmir at the time. And he'd arrived in Srinagar to investigate the life of Jesus alayhi salam, following on from the crucifixion, surviving the crucifixion. And he talks about the blessed tomb of this person who's referred to as Prince Yus Asaf. Mm-hmm. And he made inquiries to many people in that area of the time. Elderly had been there for near 60, 70 or even more years. And he got confirmation from these people that this person, Prince Yus Asaf, he was a prophet. And that obviously India being predominantly a Hindu country, in this one area of Kashmir in Srinagar, it's a completely Muslim neighborhood. And there's reliable testimony from various people there that this tomb had existed for around 1900 years. And the general view of the tomb of this great prophet was that he came 600 years prior to the Holy Prophet ﷺ, which is obviously in the timeline of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. And then he talks about the word Yasu, which in English means Jesus, and it could be very likely that this name slowly over time got converted to Yus Asaf. And he talks about the Gospels, obviously, that, as I mentioned before, that the Messiah, Jesus son of Mary, he had a great desire to preach his message to those Jews who had migrated. And this was the name that I couldn't pronounce, Nebuchadnezzar, who was the longest serving leader of Babylon at that time. And under his rule, a lot of Jews had to migrate due to the persecution. He then talks about more of the evidence base. So there's this French traveler, Dr. Bernier, who wrote a book like a travelogue about various European researchers who had visited and been around that area, and they all agreed that the Muslim inhabitants of Kashmir, they were all Israelites, and that due to their characteristics and their appearance and a variety of other things as well. He then talks about, obviously in the book there's various accounts of this prophet Yus Asaf, and translation at that time in the early 1900s, there was these translations of had spread across Europe of these accounts, and even the Christian clergy in the Europe, all across Europe, accepted that this person and his moral teachings were very similar to the Gospels that were readily available in English in Western Europe. And another crucial thing is the word Nabi. Nabi is obviously it means prophet, but it's definitively only referred to in Hebrew and Arabic. No Sanskrit or any language in India refers to a prophet by this name. So a prophet and a prince can only refer to, assumingly, a prophet who was in that area at that time, who was of the Hebrew descent. And then during his travels, there was a gospel in Tibet that was discovered, and it was translated. And again, the teachings very, very similar to what was found in Western Europe. And another probably useful thing as well at Jesus alayhi salam, in all the literature, in anything you found in Quran or anything else, he's the only prophet who's referred to as a prince or renowned as a prince. No other prophet has that title, or was considered to have that title. And then specifically about the tomb itself, so the head to the feet was buried in north-south orientation. And this is obviously even if we look in graves now, Muslim areas or other areas, this is specific to Muslims and the people of the book. And to the right of the tomb is an old mosque in a Muslim household. And there's a stone slab there bearing the footprints of a man, and that man was known as a messenger. And then another useful thing as well, there was a mount nearby where the tomb is called the Mount of Solomon. And we know from scriptures that Jews adopted the names of the prophets. And there may well have been a Jewish or an Israelite person of that time who called himself Solomon or referred to this mount as the Mount of Solomon. Obviously, it can't be that Solomon, that prophet, peace be upon him, because Jesus came hundreds of years after him. And then again, I mentioned about Nabi. This word doesn't find any reference in Sanskrit. And then there's a book of the Shias as well, suggesting again that this prophet was a traveler and a prince. And then this is just coming to the end of the first half of the book. There's also a shrine near the tomb, and it's very peculiar. It's a bit of a mystery that it has a very nice fragrance that's obviously lasted for about 1900 years, which in itself is very, very odd, so to speak. And there's also question marks over this shrine and how it's existed. It sort of it encroaches on the tomb itself, and people question how it can be there for so long and what's the purpose of this shrine. It's a mystery that's existed for 1900 years now. So both the footprint and the opening of the shrine, based on what the Prophet ﷺ said, are lasting signs that this grave is of a righteous person and of a messenger. And that's the first half of it anyway. Inshallah, next week we'll get onto the second half.
Yeah.
Jazakallah.
Jazakallah, incredible. So detailed, and a lot of theology mentioned in that book. Hamza, did you learn anything? You must have learned something new, but what was the thing that was like an addition to your knowledge in that?
I think specifically it's if you read Jesus in India, obviously that goes into more detail than this book as well. But I think the thing that stuck out for me, let me think actually.
MashaAllah, he's become an alim now, doesn't
No, it's not. Yeah, it's. I think overall it's a very concise version of books like The Tomb of Jesus and Jesus in India, and it's very to the point. I think the book of the Shias and the fact that Nabi's never that word has never had any reference in any other language apart from Hebrew and Arabic, again bears testimony and supports the fact that this was a prophet for the tribes of Israel. So that in itself was quite convincing.
Yeah. I think for me as well, like just how the Prophet ﷺ just writes all this in such detail, like you mentioned, there was like an imprint of the foot. It was the way it was facing, and there was a mosque there. Like, how did no one like pick these things up before? And it goes back to what we were mentioning. That's, I think, when the truth was always there, but it was just never revealed to the world.
Yeah.
And it was only when the Hazrat Masih Maud came that door just opened up, and all this other knowledge just opened up. So that's another amazing book that we just covered. So looking forward to next week. Then you left on a cliffhanger for us.
Yeah. I think the next book is more. The next half is more to do with the prophecy about Muhammad Badalwi Saab and how he would be humiliated, kind of thing.
Yeah. Incredible.